that was. So they needed something to do. I was the class clown, and there was a guy by the name of Pat Flynn there. He was a guidance counselor. And Pat Flynn decided that maybe he would send me to the local radio station. Since I was the class clown and I had some kind of a personality, they thought maybe that might be appropriate. And I think actually the ulterior motive to that was to get me out of the building so the rest of the kids in that school, small town high school, could actually get an education. I went to one of my classmates at the class of 71 in Estes Park High School was a girl by the name of Marilyn Dewell. And Marilyn and I were always close friends. I was close friends with everybody at the class of 71 and the two classes on both sides of it. And one day I was cutting up in class, and Marilyn yelled out from the back of the room, "Would you stop? You're robbing the rest of us of our education." Well, I think it's kind of ironic that I went on to continue being the class clown with a career in radio, and Marilyn went on to have a lifetime of teaching. So she was practicing what her future vocation was going to be, and I was practicing what my future vocation was going to be. So they send me to the local radio station, which was owned by a guy by the name of Paul Moyers, a cowboy from Pueblo, Colorado.
An old cowboy went riding out one dark and windy day.
That's him.
Up on the ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw a-plowing through the ragged sky and up a cloudy draw. Still on fire and their hooves are made of steel. Their horns are black and shiny and their hot breath he could feel. And a bullet flew through him as they thundered through the sky, foresaw the riders coming hard and heard their mournful cry.
Paul Moyer was a cowboy out of Pueblo, Colorado. And I can't think of anything that Paul probably hated more than hippies. And I'm probably overstating that because I don't think there was a lot of hate in Paul's heart, but he wasn't crazy about long hairs. And at the time, coming out of military school, I still had my little Marine haircut or Army haircut that they made us get. My hair didn't grow fast. So, but that was what that's what I wanted to be. That was my vocation in life. I was shooting to be a long hair. And so they assigned me to this radio station that's owned by this guy who not only was an old stock car driver and a Pueblo cowboy, but was also a musician. He and his band, the Fall River Chuckwagon Supper Wranglers, the Fall River Wranglers, had ridden horseback across the country promoting their brand of music. So the hippie wannabe gets put into a radio station that's owned by a Pueblo cowboy who owns the Chuckwagon Supper franchise up there in Colorado. There were two of them in Estes Park. And those were the kinds of songs that they sang on a nightly basis. And those were in some ways some of the songs that we played at KKEP Estes Park. And I showed up at KKEP in about October of 1970, I think. And Paul taught me how to cue records. And at the time, they had these big old turntables called Gates turntables. They're huge. Had a big felt center on them. And you basically would put the needle down on the record and then spin it until the needle hit the first notes of that song, and then spin it back a half a turn. And before you got ready to go on, you would put your finger on that record, and then you would turn the turntable on. and then you would say what you needed to say, and then about a half a turn away from the beginning of that record, you'd raise your hand up, and the record would start, and it would take a half a turn, and all of a sudden the song would come in. So he taught me how to cue records. And then he told me, I want you to, and I don't want you to say anything at any other time, I want you to say KKEP Estes Park at the top of the hour, and I want you to play this list of records. And there were cowboy tunes in there, and the Ink Spots were in there, and there was Sinatra, and there was Nat King Cole, and we were a small-town radio station. And in fact, in the mornings up there, they had the Hawaiian Melody Hour. They did the Big Band Hour. They had all sorts of segments that they did at this radio station, and I got experience in all of those. But cueing records that day. So Paul teaches me how to cue records. And then he leaves. This is my first day at the radio station. So I'm cueing records, and then I'm sitting there, nervous as I can be, about having to open up that microphone at the top of the hour and say something like KKEP Estes Park, a legal ID. I was not to say anything else, and I was just to go from one record to the next record. And that was my beginning of radio. And slowly but surely, I learned from Paul how to get in and out of records and how to do some patter in between, and talking on the radio became a little bit easier to me. And then Paul started using me to run the radio station on the weekends because we played lots of recorded stuff, religious programs, and this, that, and the other. And that allowed Paul to go down to the valley, down to Denver, and visit his girlfriend. So he had a conscientious Virgo that he knew he could trust running the radio station, and I would get there at 5:30 on Saturday mornings, and I would leave at 5:30 on Saturday evenings. Be there all day long. And that was my start in radio. And so so I worked for Paul throughout that whole summer, throughout that whole winter into the next summer, and then I went off to college. And I didn't last long in college, so I ended up back in Estes Park working for Paul. So I worked for him for another probably 9 months or so, and then I went to Colorado State University, and I got a job at a college station. Well, it wasn't a college radio station. It was like a radio station in Fort Collins, Colorado, KIX, KIIX. And then I decided that I was so good I was going to head off to Dallas, Texas. And 6 months later, I was back working for Paul in Estes Park. But I'd spent a lot of hours working for Paul Moyer, who passed away in the last couple of years. I'd kept in touch with him over the years. He knew about me being on WBT. He knew I had already been here 25 years when that took place. And I just ended up with a great relationship with this guy, and he turned out to be a mentor. Who would have thought a Pueblo cowboy and a hippie wannabe would have such a great relationship? But we did. So then I got out of radio and couldn't get back in, and I've told you over the years what all the little side jobs I had, working for Leon Russell for a while, and working for rock groups, and working for a promoter by the name of Barry Fay, and spinning records in nightclubs before disco when we were playing Foghat and Uriah Heep, that then went into BT Express and Average White Band, and then went into full-fledged disco, and then went into urban cowboy, but I couldn't get out of the nightclubs because they were paying me like $75 a night. And it was the 70s, and we were making a ton of money. I was making a ton of money. But I couldn't get anybody to hire me in radio. And then that turned out to be, as you heard earlier, in the 3 o'clock hour, we talked to a guy by the name of David Hartley. And David Hartley was the program director of KADE KBCO in Boulder, Colorado. And Hartley gave me a job, but said, you're going to have to change your name. And that's how John Hancock came about. Hancock is my real name. David is my given legal name. My mom calls me David. Bill collectors call me David. Everybody else calls me John. So that's how all of that worked. I've had some opportunity to work for some great people. Bob Greenlee at KADE KBCO. I've met some great people along the way. Bob McWilliams, who owned KGMC in Denver for a while. I was Alan Berg, the talk show host who was gunned down by the white supremacists back in 80-something. I think I was Alan Berg's first board op. And I've just had an opportunity. The people, Susquehanna Broadcasting up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania. At WARM, those people were outstanding to me. The people down in Jacksonville, the staff was great to me. The ownership fired me. So I'm not necessarily crazy about them. But boy, what a great experience Jacksonville was. And then, lo and behold, I walk into a place called Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, let's review the John Hancock Essential Musical Library. Songs that have become familiar with you over the time that we've been here. The open is done by an artist by the name of Kim Ritchie. She was just in town within the last year. We actually talked about getting her on. We contacted her. She forgot to recontact us. We forgot to recontact her. We never got to her. It's probably just as well. I don't know what I would have spent 10 or 15 minutes talking to her about, because this was the only... And I don't know that this was ever a hit. The reason I noticed this song is if you get into the lyrics, she's singing this love, but it sounds like she's singing Islam. It really does. And so that's what attracted my attention to the song. And then when I found out that it's actually called This Love and she was singing This Love, then I started paying attention to the instrumental part of that. And lo and behold, it made a great show open. For about the last, what, TJ, 8 years?
Yeah, since we've been on days.
So, Kim Ritchie, This Love, that's your first essential John Hancock musical listing. This...
I read the news today, oh boy.
We have played for I don't know how many years. To open up a segment that I've been doing for probably 20 years called I Read the News Today, oh boy. 1, 2, 3. And if I ever come back and do a commentary, or I ever come back and do a segment, it'll probably be called I Read the News. Because it's just got an air of familiarity to it, and it allows me to not only do serious stuff, but it also allows me to do whimsical stuff. And so that's the one that we did there. A little piano piece you may have heard. Name that artist. That artist is Tom Petty. There was a movie called She's the One, and this is called Airport. It lasts for 58 seconds. And if you listen really carefully to the show, you'll hear us use this at the end of segments, generally at the bottom of the hour when we're going towards the 30 news, because we had another song that we used going at the top of the hour for the top of the hour news. Now, as you well know, Tom Petty was pretty well represented on this program.
It's Friday, the John Hancock radio program.
We did 5 o'clock Petty for a while, about a year and a half.
There's some friends that I know living in this town, and I've come far to see them. Gonna track them down. They live in a brick house, painted white and brown.
And then we used this song as we went into the weekends with a calendar of what was going on and this, that, and the other. It seemed appropriate that we were doing 5 o'clock Petty, because that's when we were doing that is also when he passed away. But love us some Tom Petty, and Big Weekend is a song that's also got an acoustical version, and that's got a near and dear place. And when we played it last Friday, that kind of brought it all home that we were getting ready to leave. This song is the one that we do use at the end of segments. When my dad died, I ended up in his office back in Colorado, and I opened up his CD player, and out came the tray, and in the tray was this Buddy Rich album, which means that it was, as far as I know, the last album he ever listened to. I don't know what the last song would have been that he ever listened to, but I picked Yardbird Suite, and so we have always ended the show with this little tune, because it's just a subliminal way for me to say hello to my dad. And then there was Father's Day. This was our theme for Father's Day. The show